Assalamu alaikum everyone, this is Sanobar Sultan, and today the topic of the discussion is CSS tips for compulsory subjects. And by compulsory subjects I mean compulsory subjects of the CSS exam. In our last week's discussion I discussed how to write an English essay. That was a step guide about it. So today I will be discussing about the 5 other compulsory subjects. Now, as you know, there are 6 compulsory subjects: English essay, English précis and composition, general science and abilities, Pak affairs, current affairs, and Islamiyat. So because in my last video I've already discussed in detail, I made an entire video about essay writing, so I will not be discussing essay in this video, but I will put it in the link below. I will put the link below in the description so you can go and watch that in detail. So I will be discussing the rest of the compulsory subjects. So let's get right to it. Now the first compulsory subject that I want to discuss is English précis and composition. Now, how to prepare for the English précis and composition? Firstly, focus on the précis question. Précis question is of 20 marks, in which there is a passage given to you in which you will have to come up with the title as well as the précis of the passage. So for the précis passage, take out the past papers and do the past papers of the last 20 years. That will be sufficient exercise as well as necessary exercise for you to do. So simply do that. Simply take out the last 20 years past papers and do them and get them checked, and that would be sufficient. Now, in my very first video that I uploaded on Sanobar's World, I explained to you that my total marks were very high in my first attempt in 2016, and I failed by 1 mark because I got 39 in English précis and composition. Now, I want to tell you the reason why I got 39 and not 40. The reason is, dear audience, that the précis that year came in first person. Okay, so it started with I did this and I did that. So the mistake I made was that I wrote the précis in the first person as well, and that obviously means that my entire précis question was wrong, and because my entire précis question was wrong, I failed the précis exam only because I wrote the précis in the first person, whereas I should have written it in the third person. Précis is always written in the third person. So that is the mistake that I made, and I wouldn't want you people to make it. So do practice, and practice in the last 20 years. And of course, you know, you could say, well, but there were other 80 marks that you could have achieved by, even if you didn't get that much in précis. But no, précis is very important. You have to get it right. You have to get précis right and not make a blunder like the way I did, that I wrote it in first person, because précis is not written in first person, précis is written in third person. And in the précis, of course, we could go in detail how to write a précis, but I would just generally tell you that do not copy paste phrases from the précis. Do not copy paste phrases, do not just copy the entire lines, and exclude the examples. Basically, précis is the gist of the entire passage. So you exclude the examples, you exclude the dates from it if it's a historical passage, and you exclude any unnecessary detail, and what you will have resultantly is your précis. So it's the gist of the paragraph, and also remember that précis is always in one paragraph. So even if the passage is for 4 paragraphs, it's running on 2 pages, but your précis should always be 1 paragraph. And another tip is that the title of your précis, which is also necessary, which you will be making, should not be more than 6 words. So make sure you can, are able to succinct the topic into 6 words. So the other aspect, the other important aspect is comprehension. That is also of 20 marks. But it's the second most important element of the précis and composition paper, because after précis, the most important other question that the examiner surely checks is the comprehension paper. And for that also you should get 20 years past papers and attempt all the past papers from the last 20 years and get them checked by somebody. So practice the comprehension. Now, when it comes to synonyms and antonyms, there is no specific book. I would just recommend that take any entry level exam, booklet of any college, entry level, and just practice from there. That would be more than sufficient. Whether it's GRE or any local, even any local entry level exam, that would be sufficient for that. Another thing is that I've noticed people waste a lot of time on vocabulary. I would recommend that do not waste that much time on vocabulary, that you aren't practicing enough on précis and you aren't practicing enough on comprehension. Take, do 5 words per day, or do the maximum that you can. You don't have to do all of the vocabulary, so don't do that. All of the vocabulary is not necessary. Just do the maximum that you can, and you don't have to memorize 1,000 words, 3,000 words. Just do 5 per day, and the maximum that you can do, that should be sufficient. So, but as the last tip, or rather the summary of the entire précis and composition paper, is that focus on the précis and focus on the comprehension more as compared to the other grammar related portion of the subject. So that was précis and composition. Now we'll move on to the other subject, which is general science and abilities. Now the math portion is, of course you'll have to practice it. There's no way around it. You'll just have to practice from the past papers, practice from anywhere you can get your hands on. Put the syllabus in front of you and practice the mathematics portion. For the general science and abilities portion, I would say that it's different from the other papers of CSS because it has short answers. So you just have to write very short, very brief and to the point answers in general science, because for example, what is osmosis, what is anything about the heart or the liver or the pancreas. I mean, you can't make up stories about it, can you? It's very to the point, and that's the way the examiner likes it. Make diagrams. Diagrams are very important in general science and abilities, whether you're making the lunar eclipse, the solar eclipse, the kidney, anything, make diagrams, practice it like that. And the tip for general science and abilities is, because it's mostly, unfortunately or fortunately, it's mostly rote learning. It will have to be memorized, because that's a lot of content, especially the biology portion and other portions like that. You will have to memorize them. Now, you can't memorize it, a fortnight before the exam. You can't memorize it 1 month before the exam. So the only solution for general science and abilities is to study it, to memorize it every day. Take out 2 topics and do them every day, and that is the solution for it. It will accumulate over time, and you can self-assess yourself every 2 months or every 1 month, but you cannot do general science and abilities 2 weeks before the exam. That I can assure you. You'll have to do it beforehand. Do in little chunks. Select a few topics and do them every week, and then revise them and then move on to the next, and then revise them and then move on to the next. So that is how you will do general science. Follow the syllabus and follow the past papers. These are the 2 key aspects that you need to follow in general science and abilities. Follow the past papers, because most questions are often repeated. There are a lot of questions that are repeated from the past papers. And follow the syllabus, because the syllabus is, unlike other subjects, very to the point in general science and abilities, and they give it from the syllabus. Follow the syllabus and do the past papers. And make a lot of notes, make shorthand notes of all topics that you can memorize, like I said. That you can't do general science 2 weeks before the paper, because there's a lot of memorization involved. So that is how you will be doing it. So that was general science and abilities. Now we will go on to the next subject, that is Park Affairs. Now, Park Affairs and current affairs, these are the subjects that are very helpful in essay writing, in international relations, in political science and sociology even, So for Park Affairs, as you know, the syllabus changed in 2016. But for now, divide the Pak Affairs syllabus into two portions. First would be the pre-partition meaning pre-1947, and post-partition, post-1947. In the pre-partition topics, you will start from the Shah Waliullah and Mujaddid al-Sani and Shahid Barelvi, Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, Aligarh movement, Deobandi movement, you know, Barelvi movement. Do these topics and then hit right up to 1885. Skip the rest of them, no Mughal era, that is not necessary even though it was written in the syllabus. There hardly been any question on it, and even if it comes you can skip it. Go to 1885 and start from the formation of Congress. After you've done the names that I've mentioned, the movements that I've mentioned, the reformers that I've mentioned right now, after the reformers you go directly to 1885, the formation of Congress, and then you start from the important topics from there to 1947. Just the major portions of the history. Now after 1947, there are two books that I would recommend for Pak Affairs. Number one is The Formative Phase by Khalid bin Said, in which you can cover most of the pre-partition of Pakistan. And the second book, the very important book that you will do for post-partition, is The Constitutional and Political History of Pakistan by Hamid Khan, in which you will be told about the 1973 constitution, the types of lawmaking, mandamus and these sort of habeas corpus and other sort of actions of the law. So do keep these two books as your reference points. And the thing is that current affairs and Pak Affairs right now are overlapping. There are a lot of topics, for example, the 18th Amendment, for example, the war on terror. They are overlapping with current affairs. But what's the trick here? The trick with Pak Affairs is that you have to make sure that, what if a same question on war on terror comes in Pak Affairs and the same question on war on terror comes in current affairs? Will you attempt both the questions similarly? The answer is no. There's a different way of writing in Pak Affairs and there's a different way of writing in current affairs. Now I'll tell you about Pak Affairs. In Pak Affairs we can go into history. With the war on terror you can write in detail about the Afghan Jihad, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. You can write in detail about this. You can write historical perspectives. But in current affairs you can't do that. I'll deal with that in the current affairs portion. And the trick is that in Pak Affairs, give references of at least two books in every question. Make diagrams. For example, the Aligarh movement. You have a question on Aligarh movement. So make a map of the subcontinent and pinpoint Aligarh on it. That gives a very keen edge, that gives a major edge to you as the student. And the examiner, that really becomes prominent to the examiner. Other than that, what kind of topics that you can do for Pak Affairs? You can do relations. Relations mean Pakistan-India relations, Pakistan-Afghanistan relations, Pakistan-China relations, Pakistan-Iran relations, Pakistan relations with Saudi Arab, Pakistan's relations with America, Pakistan relations with China, Pakistan relations with the Middle East in general, Pakistan relations with Russia. So make sure you do the relations, and the good point is that these relations will also come in current affairs. So you would be preparing for both the subjects and doing half the work if you can do that. So and also another recurrent theme nowadays is economics. So the Pakistani economics, for example, the water crisis. Now these days the main issue is the floods. So you can maybe a question will come on climate change in Pakistan, maybe on dam storage, So these kind of focus on the economics as well, because there will be a question of economics for sure. And of course the IMF deal that is going on. So make sure you prepare on the IMF, the current IMF program that is being drawn between Pakistan and the IMF. So that was Pak affairs, and now we will go to current affairs. Now, in current affairs, the interesting thing is that you should not read a book in current affairs. You should not give any history. Now, that is the main difference between Pakistan affairs and current affairs. In Pakistan affairs, if a question comes on war, on terror, you can write a detailed background even if it is required. For example, of the Afghan war. But if it's a current affairs question and the question comes on war on terror, you will not talk about the Afghan war because that is historical. You might, if you want, make a paragraph only, a small paragraph on the Afghan war. And the trick is the trick in current affairs is that you do not talk about history of more than 20 years in the past. So anything 20 years further in the past would become too much history for a current affairs question. So you only, in a war on terror question, you will only talk about, in the war on terror question, you will only mention a paragraph slightly on the Afghan war if it's necessary and if it is related to your question. Otherwise, not needed. Every information should be 2 years, 3 years prior. And how can you do that? Watch videos. There are small videos that BBC makes and Al Jazeera makes. Watch those clips. Go to their websites or on their social media pages, and you will find those 2 to 3 minute videos on all the general aspects, all the general topics of all the continents. What's happening in Asia, what's happening in South China Sea, what's happening in the Middle East, what's happening in Africa. So you will find these headlines everywhere and read these research papers. For example, read articles from the Foreign Policy, read articles from the Diplomat, but nothing historical. Okay, no history involved in current affairs. And relations, are another important question that might come. Relations are the same that I mentioned in the Pak affairs one, with the neighbors, with the great powers, America, China, Russia, and as well as regional organization, Pakistan, SCO, ASEAN, European Union, Pakistan's relation to them, and Pakistan's role in the Middle East crisis, and South China Sea, Pakistan's role in mediating between Saudi Arabia and Iran, US and China Cold War, US and Russia Cold War, the Ukrainian crisis. Is there any role that Pakistan can play in it, or is there any impact that there will be on Pakistan? So you will keep updating this information, and as the exam will draw near, you will keep updating it even till the last night of the paper. If it's your current affairs paper, and even if you've read in the morning, you've read the newspaper and you've suddenly come up with a new information, write that, because current affairs, as much current as possible. And that was current affairs. Now the last compulsory subject is Islamiyat. In Islamiyat, there are 8 areas mentioned in your syllabus. And the good thing about Islamiyat is that most often those areas are repeated. Most often those questions are repeated. So just take out the past papers of the last 6 years and just do them. Just do the past papers of the last 6 years, and hopefully most of it is overlapping, most of them are repeated, or different shades of that same area are repeated. And do not write anything extremist in your writing, keep it balanced. I'm talking about the Islamic perspective, nothing extremist, nothing extremely liberal, but I would say that the CSS writing of Islamiyat is slightly towards the liberal, slightly towards the liberal. So make sure it's not extremist. Do not write extremist views about women. About women in Islam or women's status in Islam, because firstly, this women's status in Islam is not is quite liberating, even if you have read the real Islam. So tilt towards a little bit liberal and not make it extremist. Make sure you cover the syllabus because that is the most important topic. The important strategy is to cover all the syllabus of Islamiyat because that is what comes in the exam. So follow the Islamiyat syllabus and cover it from any notes. There's no hard and fast rule from the books that are mentioned. I don't think those books will cover everything that are mentioned. So get notes from somewhere. Any CSS book, any Islamiyat book available in the market that you've heard of, that somebody has referred to you, I think that would be sufficient. Or 2 recommended CSS notes, compiled notes in general should be sufficient. Always in every question, make sure you give an ayat of the Quran and write a hadith with proper references. Okay, mention the surah and mention the verse also. You will have to memorize that. Make out a list of 10 verses from the Quran that you think you can utilize in each question. For example, there is a verse from the Quran, quote, hold on to the rope of Allah and be not divided, unquote. So you can utilize it in any question of Islamiyat. So these kind of verses that you can apply, that you can memorize easily, and as well as that you can apply them easily in any question. And questions are repeated, so do the past papers, and I think that should be sufficient for the compulsory subjects. So that was today's lecture, dear audience. If there is any other aspect of the CSS exam that you people want me to cover, or any areas of the civil service exam, so I shall certainly cover it. So if you have any opinion, if you have any queries, do write on the comments below and I shall see to it. So thank you very much for listening. If you like my videos, if you like what I have to say, so subscribe and do watch my videos, and I shall see you all next week. Bye bye.